Have you ever heard of a vision of the Virgin Mary, where she appeared weeping for the sins of humanity? In the majestic French Alps on September 19, 1846, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to two humble young shepherds, Max and Melanie. An event that would shatter the Catholic world. This heavenly manifestation, known as the apparition of Our Lady of La Salette, delivered an urgent message of conversion and penance to a world drifting further and further from God. The beautiful lady, adorned with celestial symbols and clothed in light, shed tears as she spoke to the children, becoming the Our Lady of Tears, a figure who still calls us today to turn our hearts toward her Son, Jesus Christ. Chapter 1. The Apparition in the Mountains. On that crisp autumn morning, the pure air of the French Alps caressed the faces of Max and Melanie as they tended their flocks on the slopes of Mount Planot, near the small village of La Salette. The sun blazed in the azure sky, illuminating the verdant pastures where the sheep grazed peacefully. The two children, barely acquainted, had been sent by their employers to watch over the livestock, a common task for the children of humble families in that mountainous region. After sharing their simple lunch, the two young shepherds fell asleep on the cool grass, exhausted from long hours of watching under the sun. Upon waking, they noticed with concern that the cows had vanished from sight. Hurriedly, they climbed a small hill to search for them, relieved to find the animals resting peacefully not far away. It was then, as they retraced their steps, that an extraordinary phenomenon caught their attention. A sphere of light, brighter than the sun itself, seemed to pulsate at the bottom of a small ravine. The light began to take shape before their astonished eyes, revealing the figure of a beautiful lady seated on a rock, her face in her hands, weeping inconsolably. Her white dress was adorned with luminous pearls, and a crucifix shone brightly on her chest, emitting golden sparks. A heavy chain encircled her shoulders, while garlands of roses crowned her head and framed her bare feet, which barely touched the cool mountain grass. Fearful but intrigued, the children slowly approached as the lady rose, and with a voice as sweet as honey, yet burdened with sorrow, spoke to them in their own dialect. "Come closer, my children. Do not be afraid. I am here to announce a great message." The shepherds, overwhelmed by this heavenly presence, gazed at the luminous face of the lady, whose tears continued to fall as she began to reveal the reasons for her sorrow and the divine message she had come to deliver to humanity. Chapter 2. The Chosen Children. Max, barely 11 years old, was a cheerful and spontaneous boy, although his religious education had been practically non-existent. Orphaned of his mother at an early age and raised by a stepmother who cared little for him, the boy barely knew how to make the sign of the cross and had never attended catechism. His father, a humble blacksmith from Caen, had sent him to La Salette to work as a shepherd during the summer, seeking to alleviate the family's precarious financial situation and keep the restless boy away from the mischief he used to get into in the village. Melanie, on the other hand, was a quiet and solitary 14-year-old girl, accustomed to the hardships of life since her earliest childhood. Coming from a large and extremely poor family, she had been sent to work as a shepherdess since the age of 7, working for various employers who treated her harshly. Her reserved nature and her limited religious education made her a silent girl who preferred the company of animals to that of people, finding in the solitude of the mountains a refuge for her sensitive soul. These two children, so different from each other and without any special preparation, seemed the least likely candidates to receive a heavenly message. However, as has happened so many times in the history of the Church, divine providence chose precisely the simplest and most innocent to convey its designs. In its infinite wisdom, God does not look at appearances or seek scholarship, but the purity of heart that allows one to receive His word without prejudice or intellectual resistance. The day before the apparition, Max and Melanie had met for the first time when their respective employers decided that they should care for the flocks together. They could not imagine that this chance encounter would be the prelude to an event that would change their lives forever and introduce them into the history of the great Marian apparitions. The Virgin Mary, in her motherly predilection for the humble, had set her eyes on these two unknown shepherds, making them instruments of her message of mercy. After the apparition, the children returned to their homes, transformed by this supernatural experience. With the simplicity characteristic of their age and condition, they began to recount what had happened without fully understanding the scope of what they had witnessed. Soon, they would be subjected to intense questioning by civil and ecclesiastical authorities, enduring pressure, threats, and even offers of money to recant. However, the firmness and consistency of their testimonies, maintained without contradictions throughout their lives, would constitute one of the most compelling proofs of the authenticity of that heavenly visit in the mountains of La Salette. Chapter 3. The Message of Conversion. The Blessed Virgin, with tears that shone like pearls on her luminous face, began to speak to the children in a tone laden with maternal sadness. "If my people will not submit, I am forced to let fall the arm of my son. It is so strong and so heavy that I can no longer hold it." These opening words revealed the reason for her affliction. Humanity was moving further and further away from God, profaning the Lord's day and using the holy name of Jesus in blasphemies instead of invoking him in prayer. In detail, the Mother of God described the consequences of disobedience to the commandments. "If the harvest is spoiled, it is because of your fault. I warned you last year with the potatoes, but you did not heed. On the contrary, when you found rotten potatoes, you cursed, uttering the name of my son." Mary thus pointed out how natural calamities were not mere coincidences, but divine warnings for a humanity that had forgotten its dependence on the Creator and the need to live according to his laws of love. The central message of Our Lady of La Salette was a pressing call to conversion, a plea for heartfelt repentance and constant prayer. "You must pray well, morning and evening," the Virgin Mary urged. "When you don't have time, say at least an Our Father and a Hail Mary, and when you can, pray more." With these simple words, Mary highlighted the importance of faithfulness in small things, showing that spiritual life isn't about grand gestures, but the steadfastness of a heart seeking God amidst daily life. The moment when Our Lady spoke about the desecration of Sunday and the religious indifference spreading across France and Europe was particularly moving. "Only some old people go to Mass," she lamented. "The others work on Sundays throughout the summer. And in winter, when they don't know what to do, they go to Mass only to mock religion. During Lent, they go to the butcher shop like dogs." These harsh words weren't condemnation, but the sorrow of a mother seeing her children reject the spiritual nourishment they need for salvation. Before departing, the Virgin Mary entrusted each child with a personal secret, one they could reveal later if they wished. Then her luminous figure slowly began to ascend, her voice echoing one last time in the valley. "Well, my children, you will make this known to all my people." The beautiful lady gradually faded, until only a trail of light remained. Soon dissipating into the mountain's crisp air, the young shepherds remained motionless for a long time, their hearts filled with indescribable peace, before running to announce what they had witnessed. Chapter 4. The Revealed Prophecies. The secrets entrusted by the Virgin to the two young shepherds contained astonishing revelations about the future of the Church and the world. While initially asked to keep them, they later received permission to share parts of them. Max's secret briefer foretold famines and natural catastrophes as signs of divine displeasure, specifically warning about potato shortages and the death of young children from disease, predictions that came true in the following years with surprising accuracy. Melanie's entrusted secret was more extensive and somber, prophesying great tribulations for the Church and the emergence of false doctrines that would seduce even consecrated individuals. The priests, through their wicked lives, their irreverences, and their impiety in celebrating the holy mysteries, through their love of money, honor, and pleasures, have become sewers of impurity, revealed a portion of the message, painfully pointing out the infidelity of those who should be the salt and light of the world. These words caused great controversy when published years later. Among the most impactful prophecies was the announcement of a time of widespread apostasy. The Church will have a horrible crisis. Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. The demons of the air with the Antichrist will perform great wonders on the earth and in the air, and men will become increasingly depraved. These terrible warnings weren't meant to sow fear, but to awaken dormant consciences and provoke a sincere return to the gospel life before it was too late. However, alongside these gloomy predictions, the Virgin also offered words of hope and comfort, assuring that after the tribulations, a time of spiritual renewal would come. Then peace, the reconciliation of God with men. Jesus Christ will be served, adored, and glorified. Charity will flourish everywhere. This contrast between darkness and light, so characteristic of prophetic messages, reminded the faithful that human history, with all its vicissitudes, remains under divine providence, guiding everything towards a glorious end. The authenticity of these secrets was meticulously examined by ecclesiastical authorities, who repeatedly questioned the seers to detect possible contradictions or outside influences. However, the consistency of their testimonies, the impossibility of two uneducated children inventing such precise predictions about future events, and the actual fulfillment of many of these prophecies, contributed to the credibility of the Salette message, confirming its supernatural origin and its importance for the life of the Church and the salvation of souls. Chapter 5. Ecclesiastical recognition. News of the apparition spread rapidly through the region, attracting first curiosity and then the devotion of numerous pilgrims who flocked to Mount Plano to pray at the site of the miracle. The parish priest of La Salette, initially skeptical, began to take a serious interest in the case. Upon witnessing the spiritual transformation occurring in many visitors, with pastoral prudence, he informed the Bishop of Grenoble, Monseigneur Philibert de Bruyères, who ordered the opening of a canonical investigation to discern the authenticity of the events recounted by the young shepherds. For 5 years, a diocesan commission meticulously studied all aspects of the event. They questioned the children on multiple occasions, analyzed the coherence of their accounts, investigated their moral reputation, examined the alleged miraculous healings reported by pilgrims, and evaluated the theological content of the message. The commission members, among whom were renowned theologians, doctors, and jurists, worked with extreme scientific rigor, aware of the responsibility resting on their shoulders and the consequences of their judgment for the spiritual life of the faithful. Finally, on September 19, 1851, exactly 5 years after the apparition, Monseigneur de Bruyères issued an episcopal mandate declaring, "We judge that the apparition of the Blessed Virgin to 2 shepherds on September 19, 1846, on a mountain in the Alps, located in the parish of La Salette, presents all the characteristics of truth, and that the faithful have reason to believe it unquestionable and certain." But this official declaration, which recognized the supernatural character of the apparition, was received with immense joy by the faithful and gave a decisive impetus to the development of the devotion to Our Lady of La Salette. However, the path to full recognition was not without difficulties and oppositions. Some priests and theologians expressed reservations about certain aspects of the message, especially regarding the secrets entrusted to Melanie, whose apocalyptic content seemed too harsh. Bishop Genouilliac, Monseigneur de Bruyères' successor in the episcopal see, while confirming the authenticity of the apparition, showed more caution regarding the private revelations of the seers. He drew a distinction, a crucial one, between the celestial visit itself and the interpretation of the messages received. Despite these controversies, devotion to Our Lady of La Salette continued to spread, bolstered by the seer's unwavering testimony and the abundant spiritual fruits it bore in the lives of the faithful. The Holy See, while not directly commenting on the apparition itself, gave its implicit approval, authorizing the canonical coronation of the Virgin's image in 1879, the founding of the Congregation of the Missionaries of Our Lady of La Salette, and the inclusion of the feast day in the liturgical calendar of several dioceses. These actions confirmed that the message of conversion and penance delivered by the beautiful lady was fully in line with the Catholic faith and beneficial for the sanctification of God's people. Chapter 6. The Basilica on the Mountain. Following the official recognition of the apparition, Monseigneur de Bruyères acquired the land on Mount Planot to build a worthy sanctuary, a place to perpetuate the memory of this momentous event, and to welcome the numerous pilgrims already flocking to the site. On May 25, 1852, in a solemn ceremony presided over by the prelate, the foundation stone was laid, the first stone of what would become an imposing temple dedicated to Our Lady, Reconciler of Sinners, a title perfectly expressing the profound meaning of the message of La Salette, Mary's motherly invitation to reconciliation with God. The construction proved extremely challenging. Due to the high altitude of the site, 1,800 meters above sea level, and the harsh climatic conditions limiting work to the summer months. During the winter, heavy snowfalls and freezing temperatures brought construction to a complete standstill, while in summer, transporting materials over the steep mountain paths demanded heroic efforts from the workers and beasts of burden. However, the fervor of the faithful, who generously contributed donations, and in many cases their own labor, allowed them to overcome all obstacles. After years of arduous work, on August 20th, 1879, Cardinal Guibert, Archbishop of Paris, solemnly consecrated the Basilica of Our Lady of La Salette, a majestic building in the neo-Romanesque style, its silhouette standing imposing against the backdrop of the Alps, its Latin cross plan, 45 meters long, with two twin towers 30 meters high, flanking the main facade, evokes the cross the Virgin wore on her chest during the apparition. Inside, stained glass windows narrate the story of the miracle, while sculptures and mosaics depict the various moments of the celestial visit. Alongside the basilica, various buildings were erected to accommodate pilgrims, guest houses, refectories, conference rooms, and a hospital for the sick, forming a complex that soon became one of the most important Marian pilgrimage centers in France. The sanctuary is nestled in a setting of extraordinary natural beauty, surrounded by alpine meadows and snow-capped peaks, inviting quiet reflection and contemplation. This relative isolation, far from the hustle and bustle of large cities, helps visitors enter into the atmosphere of prayer and penance that forms the core of the La Salette message. A distinctive feature of the sanctuary is the monumental bronze statue depicting the Virgin Mary as she appeared to the young shepherds, seated on a rock, her face in her hands in an attitude of profound sorrow. This image, installed precisely at the location of the apparition, has become the spiritual heart of the complex, a focal point for pilgrims who come to shed their tears alongside those of the sorrowful mother, and to entrust their sorrows and hopes to her. Around the statue, a processional path marked by 14 crosses allows the faithful to prayerfully retrace the various moments of the apparition, meditating on the words and gestures of the Blessed Virgin. Chapter 7. The Attributed Miracles. From the first days after the apparition, numerous pilgrims began to report extraordinary graces received through the intercession of Our Lady of La Salette. The first officially recognized miracle occurred just weeks after the celestial event, when a nun from Grenoble, Sister Saint-Pierre, suffering from a terminal illness and completely paralyzed, instantly regained her mobility and health after drinking some water from the spring that had begun to flow at the exact spot where the Virgin had appeared, water that had never existed there before. The sanctuary's archives preserve thousands of written testimonies of healings inexplicable to medical science. Among the most notable cases is that of Antonietta Carini, a 5-year-old Italian girl suffering from a severe form of poliomyelitis with complete paralysis of her lower limbs. After a novena to Our Lady of La Salette, during which her parents applied water from the miraculous spring to her, the little girl experienced a complete and instantaneous recovery, leaving the doctors who had given her up for dead astounded. Their own reports confirmed the scientific impossibility of what had happened. No less impressive are the testimonies of spiritual conversions, often more significant than physical healings. The case of the writer Léon Bloy, known for his initial hostility towards religion, is particularly emblematic. Deeply impacted by reading the messages of La Salette, Bloy underwent a radical transformation, becoming one of the most passionate Catholic apologists of the 19th century and a fervent promoter of devotion to the Weeping Mother. His work, The Woman Who Weeps, is one of the most penetrating analyses of the prophetic and spiritual meaning of the apparition. Among the collective graces attributed to Our Lady of La Salette is the miraculous protection of the sanctuary during the 2 world wars. Despite its strategic location in a region that saw intense fighting, the religious complex remained untouched, while similar buildings in the surrounding area were severely damaged or destroyed. Particularly during World War II, when German troops occupied the area, the religious and pilgrims sheltered in the sanctuary experienced a series of providential interventions, many of which were considered miraculous. Beyond these extraordinary events, Our Lady of La Salette continues to shower down quieter, yet no less real graces into the daily lives of her devotees. Think of family reconciliations, the breaking of addictions, unexpected solutions to seemingly impossible problems, comfort in sorrow, and above all, profound conversions that transform entire existences. Each of these small miracles helps keep alive the memory of that mountain apparition and makes its message of conversion and hope relevant for new generations of the faithful who come to prostrate themselves before Our Lady of Tears. Chapter 8. The Missionaries of La Salette. The same year the apparition was officially recognized, Monsignor de Bruyas, understanding the need for priests specifically dedicated to spreading the Virgin's message and ministering to pilgrims, founded the Congregation of the Missionaries of Our Lady of La Salette. On May 2, 1852, the first 6 priests received their canonical mission to establish themselves on the Holy Mountain and begin a ministry that would soon spread throughout the world, carrying the message of reconciliation to 5 continents. The beginnings of the congregation were humble and difficult. The first missionaries faced not only the harsh climatic conditions of the place, isolated by snow for several months a year, but also opposition from some ecclesiastical sectors and criticism from anti-clerical media that questioned the authenticity of the apparition. However, their perseverance and the witness of their consecrated lives progressively gained the respect and admiration of both friend and foe, consolidating the presence of the religious community in the sanctuary. The specific charism of the missionaries of La Salette centers on reconciliation, understood in its broadest sense, reconciliation with God through personal conversion, reconciliation with one's brothers and sisters through forgiveness and fraternity, and reconciliation with creation through respect for God's work. This threefold approach, directly inspired by the Virgin's message, translates into a multifaceted apostolate that includes preaching popular missions, spiritual direction, the ministry of confession, the promotion of social justice and the care of the environment as the common home, cherished by the Creator over the years. The small seed planted in the Alpine mountains grew into a leafy tree with branches in numerous countries. In 1859, the missionaries established their first foundation outside France, in the United States, where their work among Catholic immigrants earned them rapid recognition. They later spread to Canada, Brazil, Madagascar, the Philippines, Poland, India, and many other nations, always adapting their reconciling charism to different cultures and pastoral needs, but invariably maintaining the core message, the urgent call to conversion and persevering prayer. Alongside the men's branch, a women's congregation also arose, the Sisters of Our Lady of La Salette, dedicated primarily to the Christian education of youth and the care of the sick and needy. Though less numerous than their male counterparts, these religious women have carried out equally significant work, especially in disadvantaged regions where their witness of dedication and service is a powerful sign of Mary's maternal love for her most vulnerable children. Together, both congregations, supported by numerous committed lay people who form the Saletinian family, continue to keep alive the spirit of that apparition, which invited everyone, without distinction, to live the gospel more faithfully and to become agents of reconciliation in a divided world. Chapter 9. Popular Devotion. Devotion to Our Lady of La Salette quickly took root in the hearts of Christian people, transcending geographical and cultural boundaries to become one of the most beloved Marian devotions in the Catholic world. Initially confined to the Dauphiné region, where the apparition took place, veneration of the Weeping Virgin spread like wildfire throughout France. Fueled by numerous testimonies of graces received and by the tireless work of the missionaries, who preached her message in parishes and rural communities. A distinctive feature of this devotion is its strong penitential character, which distinguishes it from other more festive manifestations of Marian worship. The faithful who come to La Salette are generally motivated by a sincere desire for conversion and reparation, aware that Mary's tears are a maternal call to examine one's own life in the light of the gospel. This penitential dimension is expressed in practices such as voluntary fasting, frequent reception of the sacrament of reconciliation, praying the Stations of the Cross on the path leading to the sanctuary, or the nocturnal Eucharistic adoration vigils that gather thousands of pilgrims, especially around the anniversary of the apparition in many parts of the world. Replicas of the original sanctuary have sprung up, allowing those who cannot travel to the French Alps to participate in Saletinian spirituality. One of the most important is located in Attleboro, Massachusetts, United States, where the missionaries established a pilgrimage center in 1934 that faithfully reproduces the topography and buildings of Mount Plano. Of similar importance is the Sanctuary of Oliveira in Brazil, which annually attracts hundreds of thousands of devotees from throughout Latin America. These spiritual branches keep the charism of La Salette alive, adapting it to different cultural contexts, but always preserving the essential core, the invitation to reconciliation through prayer and penance. Brotherhoods and associations dedicated to spreading devotion to Our Lady of La Salette constitute another fundamental pillar of her cult. Composed mainly of committed lay people, these groups organize pilgrimages, novenas, prayer vigils, and works of charity inspired by the message of the apparition. Many of them have also developed important social work, establishing medical dispensaries, schools for disadvantaged children, and shelters for the elderly and homeless, thus making tangible the spirit of reconciliation and solidarity that characterizes Saletinian spirituality. Folk art has also contributed to spreading devotion, depicting in paintings, sculptures, ex votos, and songs the moving image of the Weeping Virgin. In many Catholic homes, especially in rural areas of Europe and Latin America, you'll often find prints or small images of Our Lady of La Salette presiding over the family altar, silently reminding residents of the importance of daily prayer and respecting the Lord's Day, two central aspects of the message given to the young shepherds. This constant presence in domestic religiosity ensures the transmission of devotion from one generation to the next, keeping alive the memory of that heavenly lady who descended into the mountains to remind her children of the path back to the Father. Chapter 10. The relevance of the message. Today, more than 175 years after the apparition, the Virgin's words at La Salette retain a surprising timelessness, challenging 21st century believers with the same urgency with which they resonated in the Alpine mountains. The desecration of Sunday, denounced by Mary as one of the main reasons for her sorrow, continues to be a widespread reality in our secularized societies, where the Lord's Day has been replaced by another day of consumption and entertainment, losing its sacred character as a privileged time for encountering God and strengthening family ties. The irreverent use of God's name, another of the sins pointed out by the Virgin, has taken on even more serious dimensions in our time, where the media and social networks constantly spread blasphemies and mockery against the sacred. What, at the time of the apparition, was limited to coarse expressions from cart drivers and farm laborers, has today become a cultural industry that exploits irreverence as a source of profit, deeply wounding the heart of Christ and provoking the tears of his Blessed Mother, who continues to intercede to stop the avenging arm of her Son. The invitation to persevering prayer, the core of the La Salette message, resonates with particular force in a time marked by frantic activism and constant distraction. "You must say your prayers well, morning and evening," the Virgin asked the shepherds, reminding us that without this loving dialogue with God, our Christian life withers and loses its deep meaning. In a society that values productivity and tangible results, silent prayer seems like a waste of time. However, as Mary teaches us, it is precisely in this apparent doing nothing that we find the strength to transform the world according to the divine plan. Especially significant is the warning about the natural consequences of turning away from God, when the Virgin linked bad harvests to infidelity to the commandments. She wasn't establishing a simplistic relationship of punishment, but revealing the deep connection that exists between the moral order and the natural order. The current ecological challenges facing our planet can be read in the light of La Salette as a call to recognize that the environmental crisis has spiritual roots, the forgetting that we are stewards and not absolute owners of creation, and the breaking of the covenant with the Creator who entrusted us with the care of his work. The message of Our Lady of La Salette, far from being diluted over time, acquires renewed prophetic force in the face of contemporary challenges, inviting us to a comprehensive conversion that encompasses all dimensions of existence: personal, community, social and ecological. In a world wounded by divisions, injustices and crises of all kinds, the Mother's tears remind us that the true path to peace and reconciliation necessarily passes through a sincere return to the gospel life, the only source of hope for a humanity that, despite its technological advances, continues to experience a profound spiritual emptiness that only God can fill. Chapter 11. The symbols of the apparition. Every detail of the apparition of Our Lady of La Salette is laden with rich symbolism that theologians and mystics have been unraveling over the years, discovering in them profound spiritual teachings. The first and most evident is the weeping posture of the Virgin, sitting on a rock with her face in her hands. These maternal tears constitute the core of the message. Mary, like a new Rachel, weeps for her children and refuses to be comforted because they are no more, Matthew 2:18, not because of their physical death, but because of their spiritual death, having voluntarily distanced themselves from the source of life, which is God. The radiant crucifix that the lady wore on her chest, with the instruments of the Passion on either side, a hammer and tongs, evokes the central mystery of our redemption. Mary does not come to bring her own message, but to remind us of the redemptive sacrifice of her Son, whose infinite love is manifested on the cross. The hammer, symbolizing the sins that continue to crucify Christ, and the tongs, representing the repentance that takes him down from the wood, remind us of our active participation in the drama of salvation. With our actions, we can increase the suffering of the Lord or contribute to alleviating his pain. Particularly eloquent is the heavy chain that oppressed the Virgin's shoulders, contrasting with the garlands of roses that adorned her head and feet. This juxtaposition of elements symbolizes the tension between the weight of sin, which enslaves humanity and afflicts the mother's heart, and the promise of divine grace, represented by the flowers, which is always available to those who open themselves to it with a contrite heart. The implicit message is clear. Even in the midst of the deserved punishment for our faults, mercy flourishes for those who humbly acknowledge their mistakes and sincerely desire to amend them. The variations of light during the apparition, described meticulously by the seers, also contain rich symbolism. The Virgin first appeared as a luminous sphere that then took human form, reminding us that Mary is the woman clothed with the sun of the Apocalypse 12:1. The creature closest to God and therefore most imbued with his light. At the end of the vision, when the lady began to ascend, her figure gradually faded until it became pure light again, suggesting her return to celestial glory after having fulfilled her earthly mission. This interplay of light and shadow speaks to the spiritual journey of every Christian. We are called to progressively become light, letting divine grace dissolve the darkness of sin until the image of Christ shines in us. The very place of the apparition, a secluded and elevated mountain, connects with the rich biblical tradition that sees the heights as the privileged place for an encounter with God. From Sinai to Tabor, passing through the Mount of Beatitudes and Calvary, mountains have been the stage for divine revelations and pivotal moments in the history of salvation. By choosing Mount Plano for her manifestation, Mary inscribes herself in this tradition, inviting us to ascend the mountain of the Lord, Isaiah 2:3. That is, to elevate ourselves spiritually above earthly concerns, to contemplate celestial realities, and to hear more clearly the voice of God that resonates in the heights of the soul. Chapter 12. The legacy of the seers, Max and Melanie, the two humble young shepherds chosen as messengers of the Queen of Heaven, followed very different paths after the apparition that transformed their lives forever. Max, who was barely 11 years old when he beheld the luminous lady, lived an existence marked by contrasts and difficulties. After a brief period in the seminary, where he failed to adapt to the academic discipline due to his restless nature and lack of prior education, he tried various trades without finding stability in any of them. His sometimes blunt sincerity and his refusal to alter his testimony to please those who tried to manipulate him earned him numerous antipathies, but also the respect of those who appreciated his unwavering fidelity to the truth. Melanie, on the other hand, entered religious life shortly after the apparition, first with the Sisters of Providence in Corr, and later in the Carmel of Darlington, in England. However, her independent character and her conviction of having received a special mission from the Virgin led her to abandon traditional convent life to follow a more solitary path as an itinerant nun. Finally settled in Italy, she dedicated her last years to spreading the message of Our Lady of La Salette, especially the more apocalyptic aspects of the secret that had been entrusted to her, which caused quite a few controversies and earned her the misunderstanding of many, even within the church. Despite the tribulations that both seers experienced throughout their lives, they never retracted their initial testimony nor added fanciful elements to the original account. Repeatedly questioned by civil and ecclesiastical authorities, subjected to pressures and temptations of various kinds, Max and Melanie maintained an admirable coherence in the essentials of their experience. Although with different interpretive nuances that reflected their different personalities, this constancy in their testimony, maintained for decades and until the end of their days, constitutes one of the strongest arguments in favor of the authenticity of the apparition. Max died prematurely on March 1st, 1875, at the age of 39, after a modest life filled with material difficulties. Before he died, he received the last sacraments with great devotion and renewed his testimony about the apparition with these words: "I saw the Blessed Virgin. That is absolutely true. I maintain it, and I will maintain it until my last breath." His tomb in the cemetery of Cours, as simple as his existence had been, soon became a pilgrimage site for devotees of Our Lady of La Salette, who saw in the humble shepherd boy an example of fidelity to the mission received. Despite the misunderstandings and sufferings it brought him, Melanie outlived her fellow visionary by several decades, passing away on December 14th, 1904, in Altamura, Italy, where she resided as a Franciscan tertiary dedicated to prayer and penance. Her last years were spent in relative solitude, sustained by the certainty of having been an instrument of a providential design that surpassed her human comprehension. In her personal diary, found after her death, she had written, "The tears of my heavenly mother have been the most precious treasure of my life. For them I have joyfully endured all the crosses that the Lord has wished to send me." Her mortal remains rest today in the Church of the Sacred Heart of Altamura, where numerous pilgrims come to venerate the memory of that simple girl to whom the Queen of Heaven entrusted one of the most important messages for humanity in modern times. Chapter 13. Prayer to Our Lady of La Salette. O Blessed Virgin of La Salette, Mother who weeps for your lost children, to you we come with filial confidence, moved by your tears that continue to flow over a world estranged from your Son. You, who descended to the mountains to remind us of the way back to the Father, receive our humble plea and present our needs before the throne of divine mercy. We remember with gratitude your apparition to the humble shepherds, when you appeared with your breast adorned by the saving cross and your shoulders burdened by the chain of our sins. That day you called us to sincere conversion, to persevering prayer, and to respect for the holy name of your Son, and the day consecrated to the Lord. Today, loving Mother, we renew our purpose to live according to your maternal warnings, aware that your tears are an expression of the purest love that longs for our eternal salvation. We implore you, reconciling Virgin, to intercede for the Church of your Son, that it may remain faithful to its evangelizing mission amidst the tribulations and challenges of the contemporary world. Strengthen with your maternal protection the Holy Father, the bishops, priests, and religious, that they may be authentic witnesses of the gospel and guide God's people wisely along the paths of holiness. Enlighten especially those consecrated ones who have strayed from their vocation, that, moved by your weeping, they may return to their first fervor and the generous service of their brothers and sisters. Spread your protective mantle over our families, domestic sanctuaries where faith and Christian love must be cultivated. Help us to rediscover the sacred value of Sunday as the Lord's Day, a privileged time for encounter with God and the strengthening of family bonds. Teach parents the serious responsibility of educating their children in faith and the fear of God. Young people, the value of purity and generous dedication to evangelical ideals, the elderly, the serene acceptance of their limitations and the transmission of their wisdom to new generations. Sorrowful mother, whose tears bless and purify. Accompany with your comfort all who suffer in body and spirit, the sick and dying, the poor and marginalized, those persecuted for the sake of justice, those who mourn the loss of loved ones, those who have lost hope and the meaning of their lives. May all find in your maternal lap the relief of their sorrows and the strength to unite their sufferings to the redeeming cross of Christ. Finally, Our Lady of La Salette, we entrust to you our own personal conversion. May your tears soften the hardness of our hearts and prepare us to receive the divine word with docility. May your message of reconciliation inspire us to be architects of peace and brotherhood in a world divided by hatred and indifference. May your example of faithfulness teach us to persevere in prayer and good works, until the day when, through your intercession, we are admitted into heavenly glory, where there will be no more weeping or pain, but the perfect joy of eternally contemplating the merciful face of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.